Hi everyone. Um, Things in our power and things not in our power. Um, how do we determine the difference between those? And when sometimes there may be something that was within our power, but then suddenly becomes no longer within our power. And for a Stoic, this is a very important question because one of our one of our central, philosophies of life is to maintain, a balance for our inner tranquility. So, how do we determine what's in our power and what's not in our power? And we do this from using our reason. So, Epictetus in Book 1, Chapter 1 of the Discourses discusses this topic, and he begins the first part of this particular discourse on what's in our power and what's not in our power by talking about reason. I think really a good relevant example to use is, in the Discourses, Epictetus uses the example of grammar, how we could know grammar and we could use grammar to write a letter, but what we should write or when we should write or should we write at all or to whom we should write is that's up to our reason. So grammar is not aware of itself. We are aware of it because of our reason, because of our consciousness. He uses another example that I think is really interesting, which is gold. Gold doesn't know that it's good. Only we, with our consciousness and reason, attribute a good to gold. So it's a construction. We might say in modern terms, it's the gold. The desire for gold is a maybe. We could say today maybe it's a construction, a social construction. So I think this is really interesting because we can, in the modern world, actually fit this really well with AI. We can see this illustrated with artificial intelligence, where we may have machine-based learning or machine-based intelligences that can understand grammar, that could actually write out a paragraph on a topic. I mean, I don't know that we have this yet, but it's probably coming very soon. But that artificial intelligence wouldn't necessarily know, what, if it should write the letter or not, or what it should write to whom, and the same thing about gold. Would there be a way for artificial intelligence to understand the desire for gold? Or would it just be something like, okay, well, humans desire this for gold, so this is, it would lack this, or it's a challenge then for an AI to be able to have this capability of reason and consciousness. So that's the first half of the discussion, and the second half is, I think the points made in the second half of the first chapter, what's in our power and what's not in our power, about how we get attached to many things, and the more things that we're attached to, the more that those things weigh on us or weigh us down or require our attention. So there is more chance then to disturb our inner tranquility or disturb our tranquility because more things can go wrong. One example that he gives, I think that's a really good example, is of a person who wants to go sailing and is frantically waiting for the wind to change because the wind's not in the right direction. And so sits there on the shore saying, when is the west wind going to blow? And so obviously that's something that's out of our control. What is in our control, though, is to understand, using our reason, that the wind is outside our control. So that would be an instance where we would be behaving irrationally to be sitting, waiting in a distracted manner, anxious for the wind to change, when there's no way of knowing if the wind's going to change. That's not to say we couldn't use our reason to, in modern times, to maybe say, oh, well, the forecast is that the winds are going to change directions at around this time. I can check back then. There's nothing wrong with wanting the wind to change. I think the issue would become if we let the distraction of waiting for the wind to change or wondering if the wind's going to change to control us, because then we're no longer in control of ourselves. And then also in chapter 1 of book 1, he mentions a really extreme example, and that's of public execution or beheadings that have occurred to some people, because sometime, I'm not 100% sure of the historical context, but if I remember right, this is sort of the late Roman era where philosophers were sometimes periodically ran afoul of maybe the government or the emperor, and so they were sentenced to death, which is actually what ultimately happened to Seneca, a very well known Roman philosopher, Stoic philosopher. So he uses the instance of beheading. I mean, we can definitely relate to death today just as much. I mean, maybe we're not being beheaded by the state, but death in general is something that, fear of death is something that a Stoic definitely needs to address and to overcome in order to lead a tranquil life, because the argument is made actually in chapter 1 that beheading, the decision of an emperor to behead you, is one of those things that fall outside of your control. So I think we could extrapolate that. We might not relate so much, like I said, to beheading, but we can definitely relate to death. And I think of an instance where perhaps we have a dire diagnosis and we have tried to live, using the Stoic principles of virtue and excellence. We've used our reason to try to get the best treatment that we can, but then we reach a point where we understand that to continue living is to no longer be living in virtue and excellence, and to be living in a state of where we're no longer, where we're actually pursuing life irrationally, and also unvirtuously. So we may make a decision at that time to enter hospice if our treatment options have run out, and try to live the remaining time that we have in a using virtue and excellence and with our inner tranquility intact. So I think that we can relate to that. I think that is difficult to do, but definitely an exercise worth doing regularly in your daily life, is to recognize your own mortality, so that when the time comes to let it go, that you can do it with virtue and with your tranquility intact. So what's in our power and what's not in our power? I think this is a very central tenet to living a Stoic life, because so much of our virtue and excellence, and so much of our inner tranquility sort of relies on being able to determine those what's in our power and what's not in our power. So we have to start with being able to do, to recognize that, because it's not always just intuitive, and also our natures a lot of times push us into the sailor, for example, and that is waiting for something that's outside of our power. So I think that this lesson is very relevant to the Stoic today. So I think that wraps up chapter 1. Chapter 2 of the Discourses is coming up, and that is how one may be true to one's character in everything. So that should be good. That's the next video coming up. And until then, I will catch you guys soon.